What do you do when you're facing a better team? Do you make big tactical changes? Do you go defensive? Do you change nothing at all? So I'm not really going to give you my opinion on this. I am going to show you what the best way to do this is using a newly developed test league. And it is going to tell us the answer. So those familiar with the channel might know about the test league that we use for testing tactics. It doesn't work for this. We need a newly developed test league, which is one of the reasons for a long time between uploads as I've developed this thing. Also, new location and doggo with a cone on his head. This is actually a whole series of test leagues with just 2 teams in, so it's head-to-head fixtures, so we can specifically test when one team has one set tactic or one set of players who are stronger than the other team. What can we do to beat them? These guys play each other a whole host of times, home and away, over 5 seasons worth of data, so we really get good data on this. And hopefully it's going to give us some good answers about what tactical tweaks work when you're playing against a stronger team. So the teams that we're testing with are very similar to the previous test teams that we used. Everybody has identical stats in all of the same areas. Every position has the same stat. All the teams are identical in every way. I've also used FMRTE to freeze all the attributes on everything throughout the course of 5 seasons, so the development doesn't alter. And every team in this league is going to be playing a team that is slightly stronger in every single attribute than them. So across the board, slightly better at running, slightly better at jumping, slightly better at finishing, marking, tackling, the works. And this is enough for a massive difference in points over the course of the season. So anything we can do to reduce that is really going to show through the data. And I have done extensive testing looking at all the different tactical settings. And I'm going to show you a whole host of graphs looking and showing you the work I've done. And those of you who are still with me and ready to see some graphs, let's get into it. So first off, I started playing around with like pressing and the defensive line. And just as a guide to the graphs here, the points difference on the y-axis is the difference between our team and the better team, which on average is like minus 60 odd points per season, is how far behind we are. So the further down the bar goes, the worse the tactical change is. The smaller the coloured bar, the better the tactic. And then the different tactic changes are labelled at the bottom. The opposition teams were a standard 4-4-2, except they had my best defensive settings applied to them from one of my older videos. Check the playlist if you want to see that. And it looked like there were some solid options in sort of the mid and low block regions, and also changing the pressing, going to like much less often pressing or much more pressing, all seemed like they yielded something. So I was feeling kind of positive. Mentality also very curious in that going more attacking genuinely seemed to yield us more points than being very defensive over the course of the entire season. I've not included normal in here, as normal was like our standard setting, and you can still see a trend without it being there. Also, regrouping and holding shape seemed to be much stronger than the counter pressing. So I felt confident that we were seeing some differences and we could really start to tease something out of this. So I started being a little bit more methodical, and I also really nailed down what a standard expected points are for just a normal tactic versus a normal tactic with that difference in attributes. So I took a huge average of all those standard points so that we got like a really strong average for the standard, and then we had something to compare against. So our standard actually comes out at sort of minus 63 points, I think it is. So we need to get anything better than that to show that the individual change is better than our standard tactic. And all of a sudden, when I started looking at things individually on their own, of the countering and pressing options, counter press itself showed itself to be more valuable than any of the other options. And in terms of the passing options, being much more direct was also slightly more valuable than any of the other passing settings. However, these are really small points difference. There's like 3 points difference over the seasons in comparison to our standard tactics. So these are not huge at all. We're not seeing huge improvements. Looking at tempo, I want to say that there's no real trend here, or other than at lower tempo, we saw like a sweet spot for a real strong improvement in our passing and our points gained. We really shortened the distance to the team above. However, that slightly makes me concerned when you look at the lower setting, where actually, at lower passing tempo, actually, it was way worse. But there was definitely a trend towards improvement of our tactic when we played much more narrow, with fairly narrow, and then narrow being the best of the options. So perhaps condensing that space doesn't give any room for those better players to get past you, and you can sort of make it a bit of a brawl in the middle and perhaps just do a bit better. We looked at all the passing option settings. Very little difference between any of these. I think these are much more used in being complementary to other settings, more on that later, rather than themselves carrying a great weight towards a tactic, especially when your team has zero strengths or weaknesses. So, I started feeling a bit positive, like we've got an idea of some key things that might work, got a few tempo options that we can play around with and look at, try and include those in combinations. Also, we can really look at our pressing combinations and really try and improve what we see here by combining low blocks and pressing variations. This did not turn out how I expected. When I combined low block with less often pressing and then played around with the defensive line, it was all terrible. Every one of those, we lost those leagues by more than 80 points on average. They're off the chart. I've tried to keep charts the same throughout this, you'll notice. These ones are just off the chart bad. Other than, did manage a low block, much more often step up variety, which performed alright, but still worse than the standard did in this run. So, I wanted to look at some of these combinations that we've identified and look at them all in combination together. I took five elements for the combinations, including width, looking at very narrow, tempo, looking at playing much more direct, or directness of passing, looking much more direct, tempo, looking at slowing it down a bit, and looking at a couple of the pressing combinations. And I combined them all together in all different ways, which you can see, rather than write them all out on the x-axis, they're all just numbered as like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Here's the graph, I'm putting it up there but they were all pants. They were all over 70 points, they were all rubbish. So what am I saying here? What is this telling us? Well, perhaps there are some individual tweaks we can make that make us better when we're playing very strong teams. However, when we added those in combinations, everything starts to fall apart. So really, we don't want to deviate too much from our tactic as we know it. Was this testing useless? Was it telling me nothing? No, not really. So I took the most successful tactic we had developed already with the 4-4-2. See previous videos if you want to look at that. I'm going to link it at the end anyway. And pitched it against the standard 4-4-2 that had been doing well, and against the bog standard 4-2-3-1 game press that everybody knows and loves and always performs very well as well. Success. We can actually do something that is better than our standard defensive tactic. And it is the default tactic that we use against normal strength teams. It even beats out the 4-2-3-1 game pressing, which I was impressed by, because obviously that's always strong, right? So what's this saying is our strongest tactic normally is also our strongest tactic against stronger teams. And is that what I'm saying overall? Sort of, but wait. These teams that we're facing are all equally better. What happens if the team that we're playing against is just better in one specific way? So in this instance, faster. In this instance, in these tests, the teams had one thing more than us, and that was pace, nothing else. In this graph, the yellow, the best defense, is our standard tactic. And all of a sudden, using a low block, staying on your feet, showed vast improvements versus a pacey team than it has elsewhere. And this actually makes logical sense, right? Getting lower, getting more people behind the ball, you're negating some of that pace. It's logical changes that you can make. Kind of gives me a bit more faith in the match engine versus some of the previous tests I was doing there. This is something logical that you can work your way through and work with. So we can tailor our tactics to the strength of the opposition that we play. If they're totally stronger than us in every single way, then we stick with our same standard tactic. But if they differ in certain ways, in specific ways, if they have forwards that are stronger than us, forwards that are pacier than us, we can make subtle changes to our tactics that should hopefully improve our results. But to assess all that, that is going to take more videos. So subscribe for more, or if you want to see dog in a cone more. And if you want to know how we identified the best tactic to play, check out these videos in the series. Enjoy your Football Manager, guys. I will catch you in a bit.